Brilliant. Yeah, so um, a little bit about myself to begin with. Let me just click on. Yeah, so I cover this patch, which clearly doesn't cover Cornwall at all. But my role and Amanda's role in Cornwall is to engage with churches and Christian aid groups around issues that Christian aid is passionate about. And of course, the climate crisis, care for creation is something that Christian aid has been working on for many years and is still very much at the fore of what we're doing these days. So yeah, it's great to be amongst like-minded individuals and groups. And so it's been really lovely to hear about all of the stuff that's going on in Cornwall. It sounds like a really exciting time to hear about all the changes that you're making in your churches and churchyards. It's an uphill battle sometimes, but it's nice to celebrate the wins, isn't it? So I thought this morning I'd talk to you briefly about three things. Firstly, the impact of climate change, the climate crisis. And I realise very much, having listened to you all, that I'm kind of preaching to the converted here. You're all clearly a very educated and well-informed bunch, but I hope that maybe there will be a little nugget somewhere in what I've got to share that is something new to you. Then I'll talk briefly about COP28, which again, I'm sure, as many of you know, is taking place at the end of November, beginning of December in Dubai, and then a little bit about campaigning with Christian Aid and how that all ties together. You may be able to hear from my voice that I feel like I've been recovering from a cold for many, many weeks. So perhaps not recovering, just with a cold for many weeks. So I've got a couple of opportunities for breakout rooms in the middle of the talk as well, which will just give my voice a chance to recover. So I'm going to talk about the impact of climate change in a variety of different ways. Not every impact, and in fact, one of the first breakout room we'll have is an opportunity for you all to talk about where you've seen impact both at home and overseas. But just a couple of snippets for you, really. The frequency of droughts in sub-Saharan Africa tripled between 2010 and 2019 compared to the years 1970 to 1979. And the estimated annual cost of Africa's climate adaptation by 2050 is $50 billion. Africa currently receives 18.5 billion per year in total climate finance. So you can see straight away there that there is a massive discrepancy in those numbers. Whilst the climate crisis doesn't only affect the continent of Africa, the majority of the world's most vulnerable countries can be found there. So it's a good place to start when we're having that conversation about what is the impact of the climate crisis. And the majority of those countries have neither caused nor benefited from causing climate change. But African countries, along with the more vulnerable countries around the globe, are the ones who are now bearing the brunt of its impact. So what are the impacts? Hotter temperatures, more severe storms, increased drought, a warming and rising ocean, loss of species, food scarcity, more health risks, and poverty and displacement. And as I'm sure you can imagine, those things are not found in isolation, but they all are very much interlinked. So, food scarcity is linked to the severe storms, the increased drought, hotter temperatures. The health risks are as a result as well of hotter temperatures, increased drought, loss of species. So they're not, these are not unique factors, but very much tied in to one another. So I'm not going to talk to each of those because we'd be here all morning, but just a few of those impacts to share some information. So first of all, hotter temperatures. The last decade, 2011 to 2020, is the warmest on record. Since the 1980s, each decade has been warmer than the previous one. Nearly all land areas are seeing more hot days and heat waves, and higher temperatures increase heat-related illnesses and make working outdoors more difficult. Wildfires start more easily and spread more rapidly when conditions are hotter. Temperatures in the Arctic have warmed at least twice as fast as the global average. And these warming temperatures could make parts of the Sahel inhospitable to humans, other mammals, and even desert plants. The Sahara Desert expanded 10% from 1902 to 2013 and is now growing at a rate of 48 kilometres per year in Mali, which is exacerbating food insecurity and instability. By 2050, the projected total number of potential internal climate migrants in sub-Saharan Africa could be as high as 86 million, or 4% of the entire population. It's just staggering. More severe storms is another impact that we're seeing a lot of. You've experienced that in Cornwall just recently. Destructive storms have become more intense and more frequent in many regions. As temperatures rise, moisture obviously evaporates, which exacerbates extreme rainfall and flooding, causing more destructive storms. And the frequency and extent of tropical storms is also affected by the warming ocean. So then we're seeing more cyclones, hurricanes and typhoons, which feed on the warm waters at the ocean surface. And such storms are often cause destruction of homes and communities, causing deaths and huge economic losses. This picture is of September the 10th. Storm Daniel, you'll remember, I'm sure, unleashed heavy rain in Libya, which led to catastrophic floods in the eastern city of Derna. And then conversely, we're having increased drought in places. So climate change is changing water availability, making it scarcer in more regions, and global warming exacerbates water shortages in already water-stressed regions. All of that is leading to an increased risk of agricultural droughts affecting crops, and ecological droughts increasing the vulnerability of ecosystems. Many people sadly now face the threat of not having enough water on a regular basis. That's led to, across the Horn of Africa, for example, many livestock have died. Where last year, 37 million people faced severe water shortages, food insecurity, and historic drought. That drought faced by the Horn of Africa was the continent's 152nd drought since the year 2000, which is just, staggering. The impact of food scarcity, again, as we said, linked to the droughts and storms. Changes in the climate and increases in extreme weather events are among the reasons behind a global rise in hunger and poor nutrition. So that's affecting fisheries, crops, and livestock, all of which may be destroyed or become less productive as a result. With the ocean becoming more acidic, marine resources that feed billions of people are at risk. Changes in snow and ice cover in many Arctic regions have disrupted food supplies from herding, hunting and fishing. And heat stress can diminish water and grassland for grazing, causing declining crop yields and affecting livestock. The other thing that's intersected with that recently is the war in Ukraine. Obviously not a result of the climate crisis, but it's had a massive impact on food scarcity, particularly when it comes to crops. This QR code in the bottom, if any of you have a mobile phone to hand, is the food insecurity and climate change kind of infographic from the Met Office, which is a really great tool where you can just kind of jiggle around with the projections on food insecurity depending on changes in temperature rises in the coming years. So if you have a mobile phone, you can scan that. That's something you can have a play around with at some point. So this is the impact that the climate crisis may have on poverty and displacement across Africa. And again, as I said, we can replicate this globally. It's just a lot of the examples are of Africa, which is the worst hit. So on the left-hand side, you've got the change in GDP across African nations based on a 1.5% global temperature rise. The middle one, 2 degrees, and the far right based on current policies and current trends. So you can see the percentage drop in GDP is huge. For most of the continent of Africa, based on our current policies, is going to have a massive financial impact on African nations. Climate change increases the factors that put and keep people in poverty. So over the last decade, weather-related events displaced more than 23 million people on average each year, and leaving many more vulnerable to poverty. The vast majority of refugees come from countries that are most vulnerable and least ready to adapt to the impacts of climate change. So with everything that we're seeing, climate change could push millions more Africans into extreme poverty and lead to massive migration. According to UNHCR, the UN's refugee agency, an annual average of 21.5 million people have been forcibly displaced due to climate change since 2008. In fact, it's estimated that there could be 1.2 billion climate refugees by 2050. And it's figures like that that I think help present the picture of the climate crisis as being something that affects us all, even those people who feel like they're really insulated from weather changes, and oh well, we live on high ground, it doesn't affect us, the water level's not going to rise, blah blah blah. Actually, when you start to think about the impact of climate refugees, that's something that puts pressure on the entire world, really, as people begin to move in search of safer places to live. And our politicians really need to get a grip of that, I think. Vulnerable societies also linked to poverty and displacement, really. So this is the QR code that I showed you before. This is a screen shot from that Met Office tool, which is really, really good. So this the setting that I've got on there are the future scenario of having high emissions and no adaptation by 2080. This is the impact that would have on food insecurity across much of the developing world. You can see there's high food insecurity across the whole of Africa, much of South America and Southeast Asia. It's a really scary prediction if that's where we're headed. But yeah, you can go in yourself and change those toggles and see if you can create a slightly better scenario. And then all of that has an impact on finance as well, particularly for the countries that are most affected. Estimates place the cost of this loss and damage in developing countries as approximately 290 to 580 billion by 2030, which is not that far away now, is it really? 7 years to 2030, well, or 6 years. They're just staggering figures that I can't even picture what that kind of money is like, and that's the financial impact that is going to be met by the world's developing countries. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour of some of the impacts that we're currently seeing, but I thought you may well have your own views, things that you've seen, things that you're aware of. So I thought we'd just take 5 minutes in breakout rooms, if that's okay. Does anybody want to feedback? There's no pressure if you don't want to, but anything particularly interesting or something you felt was really important that you wanted to share with the rest of the group?
Helen, did you want to say a bit about species change and fishing and stuff?
Oh yeah, well, I just the fishermen in Newlyn are catching different fish, aren't they? And there's all this tuna has appeared, and so the world is definitely warming, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then we've got butterflies overwintering, which weren't overwintering before, and some species are flourishing and others are leaving. Yeah. So that you can see the effects of climate change, can't you?
Yeah, that's a really good one. Thank you.
I never thought there would be a time that I was out here surfing and giant bluefin tuna jump around us, bigger than me, and they were in our waters decades ago, but they've reappeared in force this last couple of years.
That's amazing. I didn't know about that. So, wow. Anybody else before we continue? No? Okay. Well, I shall share my screen again. Okay, so COP28, which again, I think most of you will be aware of. It's going to be the 28th meeting of the Conference of Parties, is the full name, on climate change, and that's going to be taking place between the 30th of November and the 12th of December in Dubai, of all places. It seems quite an interesting place, shall we say, for that to take place. But there'll be discussions, presentations, and negotiations across a wide range of topics involving people from governments, businesses, communities, and thankfully faith-based organisations. Climate change affects so many areas of our lives, as we've just discussed, such as health, trade, energy, transport, buildings, food, education, young people, and all of these themes will be discussed across the fortnight. The conference actually starts with the World Climate Action Summit, and here the world leaders will come together to discuss a lot of those things, and what happens there at the start will really set the tone for the rest of the summit. And then there'll be several days covering the themes, which, next page, the themes that we've just mentioned. So what do we want to happen? What would we like to see taking place at COP? Well, we've got these four outcomes that I think it would be really important for us to see. Cutting emissions in order to limit the rise in global temperatures, but to 1.5 degrees. We've already seen on some of the earlier slides how important it is to stick to that 1.5 degree rise. We want to ensure that money is available to make some of the changes needed to support countries which are already facing reversible loss and damage. That's something in particular that Christian Aid has been calling on our government for. You may have seen a stunt that we did outside the Houses of Parliament. We had somebody in a Rishi Sunak mask sitting atop a load of oil barrels. It's quite a good picture, actually. Just, yeah, calling for the money that has previously been promised at previous COPs to the countries who are struggling the most with the impact of climate change to be able to make adaptations. But so far, our politicians have been very slow to make this money available. We also want to see putting nature, people, lives and livelihoods at the heart of climate action. So often the discussion gets overtaken by things like, you know, the rights of the fossil fuel companies and yeah, the people with the loudest mouths and biggest bank accounts, sadly, are often the ones that are heard. So we really want to make sure that people, nature, lives and livelihoods are the things that are at the heart of the discussion. And also linked to that, making sure that everyone's voices are included, especially those who are not usually heard. So what do we want to happen linked into that? This image is something which I hope you can see is really demonstrates the need for cutting carbon emissions really rapidly and deeply. This is how we can change our the average kind of CO2 output, but we're taking into account not only the emissions, but where we can remove CO2 from the atmosphere as well. And the biggest chunk of that really is the fossil fuels and fossil fuel industry. If we can cut rapidly and deeply, that we can make a massive impact. So it's going to be difficult, being that it's in Dubai, and you know, a country that has built its wealth on oil. It's going to be interesting to see how those conversations go, but that's really what we'd like to see, because if we can't cut emissions rapidly and deeply, if we're still focused on using coal, oil and gas. Interestingly though, last year was the first time that fossil fuels got a specific mention in the final text of COP. Although the wording was changed at the very last minute from phase out to phase down fossil fuels. It's a subtle difference, but obviously it's a disappointing one. So the challenge for countries where the economy is based on oil production, like the United Arab Emirates, it is going to be how will they take an oil, how can you take an oil based nation to take the lead and for others to follow? See how that goes. But we also need countries to deliver on the old promises they've made. Already mentioned the promise to pay for loss and damage. Way back in 2010, richer countries promised to mobilise $100 billion a year to help tackle climate change. And that target just hasn't been anywhere near met. Last year, a new fund to tackle loss and damage was announced. And this year, the conference needs to agree that where that money is going to come from and how to make sure that it gets distributed fairly. So COP28 very much going to be in our prayers and a focus of our campaigning here at Christian Aid. So that's what I'm going to come on to talk about now, some of the campaign activities that we're going to be running in the run-up to COP28. So there's a few ways that you can get involved today. I'm going to go into them each in a little bit more detail in a moment. But we have an activity pack, prayers and placards that you can download. And I think Rosie has already got details of all of these, so that I think they'll be being sent out to you in notices. So don't worry if you can't get all of this down. We're inviting people to host an awareness raising event, to lobby your MP, attend a webinar, or take part in the Global Day of Action on the 9th of December. So prayers and placards, again, if you have a smartphone and want to scan the QR code, that will take you directly to the download part of our website, where you can download the activity pack. In that, you'll find a prayers and placard guide, climate justice conversation starters. So if you're wanting to gather people together to have a conversation, it's great. We've got a prayer resource, press release, template letter to your MP, editable event posters, and a template placard as well. So there's lots of things in there that you might find useful if you're planning to hold some kind of protest, as these people are. I'm trying to work out what they're outside. Oh, they're actually outside our head office. So I don't think they were protesting outside Christian Aid. They probably went somewhere afterwards. Excuse me. Another thing you might want to consider doing is to host an awareness raising event. Could be a roundtable discussion, invite some speaker from Christian Aid or somewhere else to join a church service, or perhaps you want to join with a local school for an intergenerational event where you talk about the impact of the climate crisis and COP28 in particular.
Okay, so you're matter with this.
Third thing that we're suggesting you may wish to do is to lobby your MP. Different ways that you can do that. You could send a collective letter from a church or group of churches. You might want to invite them to a church service and give them time to take questions, or similarly host a coffee morning, invite your MP as a special guest to that, and question them in particular about loss and damage finance, about their approach to creation. Also going to visit them in their, if they've got a regular surgery slot, is a good approach as well. You don't have to go as a mob, though you could try that and see what happens. The fourth thing we've got available, we've got a couple of webinars coming up. The first one is this Monday evening, so 13th of November, which is a webinar entitled Get Ready for COP. So there'll be more on there about some of the things I've just mentioned. Excuse me. And about how you can get involved. Then on the 29th of November, a conversation about the link really between racial justice and climate justice. So how do we decolonize our climate conversations? That would be really interesting. And finally, we have the Global Day of Action on the 9th of December. Not put any more details on there because it's still being ironed out, and I don't know if there's a particular event taking place in Cornwall. I think you can find out more information about that at the Get Ready for COP webinar. It could be that you want to start something yourselves. And I mean, this isn't just a Christian Aid thing. So in conjunction with people like Green Christian and Climate Action, that lots of different charities will be taking action on this day. So perhaps in Cornwall, you've got a local coalition who will be doing. Finally, as well, we have a petition that you can sign, which is calling on our politicians to put money in that loss and damage fund to make reparations for the damage that's been done to some of the world's most vulnerable countries. So again, QR code there if you want to scan it. That will take you straight to the petition. So. I can share these slides as well afterwards, so don't worry if you've missed anything. Good, my voice has made it to the next breakout room. We're going to spend another 5 minutes just thinking about those suggested actions, and if there's anything that you might be able to do in the run-up to COP28. How can you make a noise in Cornwall? Is there something that's a really easy win for you? Do you know of a local event that's taking place on the 9th? Is it something that you'd like to run? Yeah, how can we respond to that? So I will stop sharing my screen again, and we can have another 5 minutes just to see how we might like to respond. Well, I hope you had a good chat in your groups. Was there any kind of consensus around something you may be able to do, or what the challenges were about acting? My group, we spoke largely about the value of various MPs and how useful they were as people to engage with. Yeah,
we did last year have a Christian Aid Loss and Damage Day, which we hosted in one of our churches, All Saints Hightown in Truro, and it is much commented on and remarked on as it was a good day to gather politicians, church leaders, the bishop, Extinction Rebellion, and actually have wide-reaching conversation and discussion about this. So we probably recognise we do recognise it'd be great to do something like that again, but we probably need to reckon that Cornwall is more regional. So trying to do one thing for all in one location is just a ticket to more CO2 emissions.
yes.
So I think looking at sort of a North Cornwall, South Cornwall, Central Cornwall, or an East West Central or something.
Yep.
But I think we'd be keen to work with you on that.
Brilliant. I'm aware as well, as was reflected in my group, that the 9th of December is not that far off right now. So to do anything on the actual day might be a challenge. But gathering MPs in your room for a kind of discussion is, I mean, there's kind of no time limit on this, is there? Although COP is taking place at the end of the month, the conversations around loss and damage and the climate crisis more generally is something that we need to keep happening. So I think whenever you can make something happen, it's a good thing. But, any other comments?
Christel, has COP got much credibility?
It's a good question. I think, I mean, there have definitely been promises made that have thus far not been kept, and that is the worry. And I think a lot of the concerns from many NGOs about this one is the fact that it is taking place in Dubai, and the influence of the fuel industry is going to be huge. But we have to hope that somewhere in the midst of that, perhaps some good decisions can be made. It's perhaps not the best tool for moving forward, but perhaps somewhere in the midst of it.
Are there any signs that the developing countries who are suffering all this loss and damage will be revolting at the lack of COP action, or action arising from COP, and the power that rests with the oil industry and the developed countries?
Yeah, I don't know. I know there were quite a number of protests at the African Climate Summit, got the name right, that took place in September, I think, in Kenya. There were a lot of protests there around loss and damage reparations and things like the East African oil pipeline that's being planned to go through Kenya, Tanzania. So there's definitely an increasing number of climate campaigners across the African continent. What their response to this particular COP is going to be, I don't know. It will be, again, something quite interesting to watch and see what happens. And I think it's really important, and that's where this decolonizing climate conversations webinar, I think, will be really useful. You know, it's so important that we listen to the voices of the people who are the most impacted by this. It's great that we can have these conversations and say this is important because it's affecting other people, and absolutely right that we should be doing that. But I think that the voices of those who are most impacted are the ones that should be given the most prominence in the discussion. So that's certainly what we're wanting to see in COP. Whether that will happen, I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions? That was the end of my presentation, by the way. But I've got, if I send it out, there is one final slide actually that is just a list of further reading on loss and damage. But that's not really a slide to share. It's more of just some useful links that you can follow if you wish. So
thank you.
Yeah.
I think we'd be very keen to have your presentation, and I'm actually very keen
Absolutely.
to share the QR codes as well. So
Great.
that's something we can easily drop into the monthly newsletter that comes out next week, and that way we can encourage more engagement with both prayers and placards and the petition.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you. Well, friends, can we show our thanks to Christel? Thank you for bringing us all of that this morning and giving of your time to enable us to understand better. Okay.
Thank you for the invite on behalf of Amanda and Christian Aid more generally. Yeah, it's great to be able to come and share with you all. So thank you.
Yeah. Before you go, Christel, may I just ask if where lobbying MPs and whatnot is concerned, have you got any sort of draft text that we could use?
Yes. So in that prayers and placards activity pack, there is a draft MP letter.
Okay. Thank you.
In that. Yeah.
Following on from Christel's talk, I've actually uploaded some information onto our website on COP28. So it's got all those links which Christel was saying, not all of it actually, but most of them, and other organisations which are doing things with COP28, like there's daily prayers with Green Christian. So so that you don't have to wait till next week, I will email you that link after this Zoom. And the only other notice I've got, seems strange not to have many notices, the Cornwall Iona Group Peace Prayer Walk is taking place on Saturday, the 11th of November, and they are going to be meeting at Tregeniggy, if I can say it right, Woodland, which is in Falmouth, 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock. Says, please feel free to bring and share a prayer or reflection. That's by one of our Methodist friends. I've been to Tregeniggy Woods and it's very nice, so it's well worth going. That's it, Ben.
Friends, thank you for sharing today. Christel, thank you for just refreshing our relationship with Christian Aid. Let's take a moment and just gather everything that we've done together in prayer, thinking of those that we know who are fully engaged in this work, but who might not be with us today. Father God, Creator God, your word reminded us this morning that basically you've got this, that you hold it all together, that you're the beginning and the end, you are the keeper of your good creation, that nothing is missing, and as such, everything is present. We ask that you would guide us in our work as creation care champions, as those working toward climate justice. We pray for our brothers and sisters around the world for whom the daily reality of food shortage, water shortage, welfare shortage is such a challenge. And we ask God that you would bring change. Do it through COP, do it through governments, do it through your church, do it through us, your people. And we ask again, Lord, that you would bring peace in this world. Wherever there is warring and faction and chaos, would you bring peace? And we ask this in your amazing and mighty name. Amen. Friends, thank you. It's always a time of great refreshing just to hear what's going on. Thank you for everything that you give and do and invest of yourselves in. And we're meeting together next on Thursday, the something of December.
14th.
Bless you, Rosie. Thursday the 14th. And we're kind of having an online social really more than anything else. We will pray, we will reflect, but your mission is, should you choose to accept it, to bring the most creative, homemade, sustainable Christmas decoration. That is it. We're having a Christmas decorate-off. So it has to be sustainable. Recycling is good. See what you can come together, but bring your Christmas decoration and we'll have a show and tell. And also can ask you to think about what for you has been the most powerful, the best good this year in regard to creation care. What is it you'd like to share with us as an encouragement as the year comes to a close of the best that has happened for you, for your church, for your community in regard to creation care and climate justice? And we'll share in that together this coming December. It will be an evening gathering. So we look forward to meeting with you then. Every blessing.